Folks, we got to listen to the scientists and the economists and the national security experts. They all tell us this is code red. The nation and the world are in peril.
This is going to be our new normal, and the effects that we're seeing from climate change are the crisis of our generation.
In my community and throughout the world, we are already seeing the effects of climate change.
Climate change is not just a threat for the future, but it's actually a real problem in the now.
Scientists and forecasters who study the connection between climate change and extreme weather say the rapid rates of sea level rise are accelerating the frequency and intensity of severe weather events.
It's a threat to humanity, that it's a threat to the United States, which will become worse and worse.
We're seeing people drown in their basements in Queens, New York because of flooding and rain. They're seeing that more territory burned down in the United States just since the first of the year than it makes up the entire landmass of the state of New Jersey. They've seen hurricane with top winds of 178 miles an hour. I mean, all of a sudden, people are seeing these things happening they never thought would happen.
And the federal government is taking measures to protect us from this crisis. But its primary weapon in this battle is over 50 years old, a law that was written long before climate change was even making headlines. The Clean Air Act of 1970 provides the basis for the vast majority of federal efforts to reduce the impact of climate change.
The Clean Air Act was first introduced in 1970, back when the kind of this notion of climate change was very much still on the fringes.
The Clean Air Act, in my opinion, is one of our nation's most successful laws. It's actually saved millions of lives since it was enacted. And the reason is that breathing dirty air is actually really bad for our health. Every year, something around 350,000 people die from exposure to particulate matter pollution. So it's kind of like a COVID pandemic happening every single year just because of our use of fossil fuels.
One of the reasons the Clean Air Act has been successful in fighting climate change is because of its flexibility, giving power to the Environmental Protection Agency to review and update air quality standards based on current conditions.
And the idea was that, of course, as time goes on, new air pollutants might arise, and the EPA needed to be able to address new things that Congress hadn't envisioned.
In 2007, the Supreme Court put this flexibility to the test.
In April, the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 in favor of plaintiffs' argument that EPA is authorized to regulate automotive greenhouse gas emissions under Section 202 of the Clean Air Act.
This is an opinion that could have some pretty significant and far-reaching impacts.
But the flexibility of the Clean Air Act also makes it vulnerable.
Any law needs enforcement and implementation by the executive branch. And what we had with the Trump administration is an administration that really was more interested in coddling the polluters.
I feel that the United States has tremendous wealth. I've made that wealth come alive. And I'm not going to lose that wealth. I'm not going to lose it on dreams, on windmills.
Science denialism and climate denialism was something that was just too prevalent in the movement. And because they didn't like the policies of the left, they decided that the problem of climate change was fake as well. And that's not how science works.
That sort of interference in science has really been harming people across the country.
Since coming into office 1 year ago, the Biden administration has been undoing more than 100 Trump-era regulations that favored fossil fuel industries and weakened essential environmental protections, including the Clean Air Act. So what happens here depends on who's in here and who's in here.
There was a time when these environmental issues and clean air and clean water were not considered partisan issues. And that time was 30, 40 years ago when we passed a lot of our landmark environmental regulations and laws in this country.
Back in 1970, you did have a lot of support among Republican elected officials for cleaning up the environment, and they showed great leadership.
Every year that we delay action, we continue to emit more greenhouse gases, and that pushes us closer and closer to higher temperatures, more climate chaos, all of those bad things.
I think there's been skepticism from people more on the conservative side of things or the Republican side of things, thinking that people on the left are just using climate change as an excuse to introduce all these other kinds of policies and agendas that would impact the economy and American society and all those kinds of things. So I think that's one problem, that there's been kind of this shift on the Democratic side towards tackling climate change using everything rather than specifically looking at the issue of reducing emissions.
But the Clean Air Act is not a strong enough weapon in this fight.
But by itself, it's not going to be enough, probably. And we do need Congress to take further steps to make sure that we're able to fully meet the climate challenge.
We need to vigorously enforce the Clean Air Act and ultimately to strengthen it.
The Clean Air Act was last updated in 1990. For it to be an effective weapon, we need it to be strengthened to stand up to the changing climate and the constantly changing political climate of Washington, D.C.
Because it's been too many years since there's been a clean air bill, and this notion that the president wants this bill so badly, I'm not so sure the president wants this bill so badly. I want it badly. I'm not so sure the president wants it badly.
The time is now to update this vital law.
This is the United States of America. There's not a darn thing we can't do. Thank you.